And we now welcome Labour mayoral candidate David Grace to the studio. Thanks for joining us today, David.
Thank you, Daryl. It's a real pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the Shire, and what are your ties to the community?
Okay, well, I've actually been visiting the Shire since I was 4, in 1960, I think. So I had a long connection with it. I've actually started living here in the late 80s when I was employed by the council to establish their community services resources. I spent about 6-7 years here building up community services to the point where we had a full suite of services, from age services to libraries. Libraries have always been here, but it came under my purview. And in that time, 2 of our children were born here, and then I went off to Canberra, and then I came back because I couldn't keep myself away from here, and I became a small businessman in Batemans Bay, where I and my wife ran Smith's Music, which was both Dick Smith Electronics and a very good music store. We did that for about 5 years, and then sadly that failed for a number of reasons I won't go into here. And then we was opened a florist in Mayoral, and I worked with her with that. On top of that, my brother runs the Protea Patch, so a lot of people would know the Protea Patch, and we've worked together on that as well, and I've done lots of other things. We had a nursery, we've done lots of things. So that's my connection. And then, of course, I've worked as a child protection worker for some time here, right, which meant that I've worked with people from all walks of life. I've seen people at their best, and sometimes at their darkest times. And I've worked with all of those people, and done what I can to make sure that those dark times aren't as dark as they should be, as they could be. I have now retired, and that is why I decided that I wanted to join the council. I have always seen that this Shire can be a beacon in New South Wales and perhaps Australia for some really important things. We've got a beautiful environment. It's not spoiled. We can actually show how we can maintain that and still actually have people coming here, retiring here, actually living their best life here. So we can be looking at how do we do that in terms of development, how do we do that in terms of maintaining energy, how do we do that in terms of actually making it so that we have a community here. We don't have people at each other's throats. Sadly, at the minute with the council, the way the council works, because it's so secretive, we have suspicion, we have anger, we have people who aren't too sure actually what's going on. And we need to stop that because we don't need to do it.
Thank you for that. With the looking at the profiles of mayoral candidates, many people are in our Shire that are very accomplished and have a lot of demands on their time. How will you prioritize your role on council if elected, and how much time will you be able to devote to the position?
Okay. If I'm elected mayor, I see that as a very privileged position, that people have given me the privilege of representing them. So I will devote as much time as is needed to do that. When I've been talking to my wife about it, what I've been saying is that, in fact, I'll probably spend at least half a day a week during the weekdays at the council doing things. That doesn't include special events, that doesn't include evening meetings, etc. Certainly during council meeting weeks, I would expect to be spending more time, because I want to make sure that the councillors are the ones who are driving the agenda, not the staff. So that means that I, as mayor, if I'm in that position, needs to work with the senior staff to make sure that the councillors' interests and decisions are respected by the staff and are followed through. So yeah, in the council, in the meeting weeks, I'll be doing a lot more work than just half a day.
And what's motivated you to run for mayor?
I think because I worked in the council, I actually spent, as I said, I think around about 6 years in the council. During that time, I saw what good councillors could do. I also saw what could happen when we didn't have such good councillors. And I thought, well, if I'm going to make a real difference, one of the places I need to be is actually around the council table. Mm-hmm. So it's always been one of those things in my my bucket list of I want to be on the council. I want to be able to actually make a difference. And that's our slogan. Mm-hmm. We do want to make a difference. We want to actually make it so that when we leave council in 2024, you will see difference, and you'll see positive difference. A council which is open, has a partnership with the community rather than has kind of the moats up with this big castle on the hill. We don't want that. The moats will come down, the moats will be pulled apart, they'll be made into parks, and people will be able to come into the council and enjoy themselves.
Excellent. On this show, we have had many visitors from different community groups, many of whom have been concerned about developments in planning, especially in Dalmeny, Browley, yep. Churros, that many of our listeners are very familiar with these topics. And some of our listeners have called in saying they've presented to council and councillors weren't there to listen to their concerns. They only showed up to vote. How do you feel that the process could be improved with council, and how could they become more accountable and more transparent to voters?
Okay. You'll see on our website quite soon a very, very detailed discussion about this and exactly what we're doing. Firstly...
And what is your website, by the way?
Eurolocal2021.com.
Eurolocal2021.com. Thank you.
What you'll see firstly is it will be compulsory. This is assuming that we have the 5 people that we can do it with, but if we have that, we will have it so that councillors will turn up to public access meetings. So they will listen. We will also limit the use of mobile phones during meetings. Their job at their meetings is to concentrate on the meetings, not on their phones. We will live stream. We think that's so important. This is part of our democracy. We need to be able to hear it. We need to be able to refer back to it. So that is important. So we are going to make sure that council is a very transparent one where people can come and they can feel like they're in partnership. One of the other things, it's not just the council meetings. One of the things I really valued when I was a worker at the council, a manager at the council, was I had a committee, which was a community committee made up of people who were interested in community services. That was my responsibility. So most of my reports went through that committee, and community members and also some people employed in that area as well came to the meeting. They voted. There were 3 councillors on that, and they listened to the people, and they were involved in that discussion as well. And the discussion of that community committee went to the council. The council could still say, no, that's not what we want, but there was real weight behind that committee. I want to have those committees again. Also want a tourism one. That was stopped by this last council. We need to have that again. We need to have a business consultation committee. Once again, that was stopped. Why, I don't know. They're the types of important people and important organisations we need to have around a table at the council so they know that their voices are being heard. In terms of development, one of the things that really annoyed me with Dalmeny, with Churros, and also with Browley was that these were development applications which in some cases were 30 years old. That is not acceptable. What we're proposing is that we have a review of any DA which is over 10 years to make sure that it still meets modern requirements. So we need to be looking at that. That would be one of the things that we'll be pushing very hard for in the council, is that we get a review of all DAs which are over 10 years to make sure that we actually meet what we need today, not 30 years ago. So it's very important to do that. I also am really interested in working with the progress associations. I can't see why we can't have those, once again, as important people who talk to us about their community, their local community, because they know that place. I don't know what's happening at Boas or at Tilba, but the people who in the progress associations do, we need to hear from them and get their views when we're making decisions about their community.
Excellent. Well, that actually tied in perfectly, because I was about to ask you what your other priorities were, but you've been very, very clear about different ways that you want to go forward should you be elected. That's wonderful. As I'm sure you know, being a local here, housing shortages are a major issue. How, especially with people who are local and have been living here for a while, what role do you think council can play in changing this situation?
Council's role is as a voice of the people. If it's working well, it's a strong voice for the people. What that means is we advocate. In this role, we don't have the money to provide housing, but the state and federal governments do. Our job is to be the people's advocate for here and to work with state and federal governments to say, how do we make sure that housing here meets the needs of the people who live here? One of the things that we will be doing, regardless of what we get in, whether we get a majority in council, is to actually call a summit of state and federal representatives, the community housing area, developers, and actually sit around a table and talk about how do we actually address this issue. As I said to you earlier, I worked for some time with people who are homeless and or facing homelessness, and I just think it's even worse now. And I tell you, it was a struggle in 2007. It's got much worse now.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's terrible.
Yes.
People are feeling it. Another issue is our environment, especially post bushfire. As you may know, the current council was called upon to declare a climate emergency, and they declined to do so. If you and your team are elected, will you be calling a climate emergency?
Yes. There's no doubt about that. There is a climate emergency. The IPCC has made that absolutely clear. Our job at a local level is to see what we can do locally. We can't do huge national things, but there are amazing things we can do locally. That in terms of solar power, in terms of community solar power, in terms of how we look at transport, in terms of how we approach our beaches, approach our development, how we look at electric vehicles. There are so many practical things we can do here which are not hard to do and actually will make our environment better. We'll actually have more people smiling if we do these things right. And the council can do those sorts of things. One of the other things I'm looking at with bushfires is we always look at recovery. We don't look at the other side of the thing. In fact, what we need to be looking at is how do we prepare? And part of that is actually making sure communities are resilient, making sure that communities feel that if a disaster hits, it's not going to be just bushfires, it could be floods, it could be storms. If a disaster hits, we know how to deal with it. And one of the jobs I'll be wanting to get done is to actually look at how we build resilience in the communities. And so one of those will be looking at how we look at the aftermath of fires as well. So there's a lot of things we are very much wanting to do to make a difference, to actually make this Shire a different place, a much happier place, a place where we know that we look after each other.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And we're coming close to the end of our time here, but just in about a minute, if you could say, how do you feel about the major developments that are coming to town? We've got the bypass, we've got the hospital. What role do you think council can play in influencing the progression of these major projects?
As I said before, those are state and federal issues. Our job is to be an effective advocate for the people. So that means we have to listen. We have to sit down, listen to people, work out where our Shire wants to be with us. I know with the hospital, we want a level 4 hospital. It's so clear. So we need to be working with our state representatives, Constance, to make sure that happens. Same thing with the road. There's a lot of concern about where the road's going to go. We need to be sitting down with, once again, Constance in his role as Transport Minister, to actually work out what we can do to make sure that the people's voices is heard. Sometimes that might mean that we actually have to explain to people, this is why this alternative has been accepted. And that's part of the role too. Sometimes decisions aren't the way that we'd like them to be. A good council is able to explain that, is able to say, okay, we didn't quite get what we wanted, but this is the reason why. So that once again, the community can grudgingly accept. At times, we have to do that. Secrecy, thinking that people can be duped is a really good way to make sure that people don't accept things and we get conflict, and that's of no use to anybody at all.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very
That's all right.
much, David Grace. He's the mayoral candidate for the Labour Party. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to end with one of the songs you've chosen. What would you like us to play?
I think we were talking about good things. So I think What a Wonderful World. That's really what we're aiming for. And I think Louis Armstrong makes it so beautifully, says it so beautifully in that song.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, David.
Okay.
Lovely to have you on the program.
Okay.
So, David, welcome back.
Thank you.
Can you speak to the current situation in the Shire? Can you speak to where you feel that the current council has done a good job and where perhaps they could be improved?
Oh, I'd like to be positive. So let's start with the positive stuff. I look at the cultural stuff that they're doing, and I think the cultural plan's good, and I think that'll be something which we will build on. I like the idea of having street art. I think that actually reduces vandalism. One of the things I'd like to see more of, in fact, is kind of graffiti art on walls. If you notice, when there's good, well-done graffiti art, there's much less real graffiti. People like it, they look at it and say, I don't need to do anything here. So the more we can do that, the better, to make the towns vibrant, to make the towns interesting. And certainly in the Bay, I'd like to see more of that. I think the Bay needs a lot more work with that. I commend the Chamber of Commerce for their attempts at doing that. I know there's been some controversy about that, but I think we need to be looking at what they tried to do, and I think they tried very hard to do the right thing there. So that's an important thing. I think, what else can I say that's positive? Let's leave it there. The council has taken the attitude, but I'm going to go council laws first. The council laws seem to think that their job is to listen to the staff and then do what the staff tell them to do. That's not what the councillors are about. Their job is to direct the staff. Their job is to say, we want to go in this direction. The job of the staff is to advise them. Yeah, there might be some rocks there, you've got to look out for it. But in the end, the job of the staff is to then say, okay, if we're going to go in that direction, this is what we do to do that. The staff do not direct. The staff advise. The councillors direct. What's happened is the staff are directing and the councillors are sitting back saying, oh, this is a fair thing. A good example of that was just at the last meeting with the Cleanaway and with the waste disposal. There were a lot of things wrong with that, and there was a unanimous decision to accept it. When you talk to the councillors, a lot of them said, "Oh, well, we didn't hear, we didn't know." That's not good enough. The councillors need to know. The councillors need to say to the staff, "I don't understand this. I won't make a decision until I do understand this. And why have you saying this way rather than that way?" The councillors need to know that, because they're the ones in the end who set the direction, not the staff. So that's an important thing. I think that goes back into what we're talking about last time, was secrecy, lack of transparency, lack of openness. We need to get rid of that. We need to have a council where there are times when there needs to be secrecy, but that should be rare. And we need to make it so that it is rare. We need to make it so that people understand why decisions were made. Well, I said before, sometimes the decision might not meet everyone's needs, but if people know why the decision was made, then they're happy. And they're more likely to be happy with it, or grudgingly agree at least.
Right, right.
And transparency also means that we need to be having much more down-to-earth meetings with the Shire, with the council, so people can actually feel like they can come. One of the things that we're aiming to do is to have the meetings not just always in the Castle on the Hill in Mayoral. We need to be moving them around, and we can do that. And we'll be looking at ways we can do that, expecting the staff to assist us to do that. So there are things which aren't being done well at the minute. There are decisions that have come out of that. For instance, the Bay Pavilion is a bad decision. And there has been clearly a bad decision for a long time. We can't do much about it, but we need to kind of work out now how we can actually kind of redeem whatever we can out of that. And one of the things I'm concerned about with that is the bowling club site. I want to make sure that we as councillors have a full set of ways we can deal with that. Perhaps we can actually make it so that it becomes part of that complex. We need to understand that. We need to hear that. We need to get the community involved in that, so that we can see what we can do to remedy what we've got. Same thing with the lack of community resources that we have in the community in Batemans Bay. Losing the community centre to rental, I can't believe that anyone thought that was a good idea. Losing our tourist centres, once again, why? These are decisions which were made in the dark, and they should not have been made in the dark. And the other ones we talked about yesterday, Bowley, Dalmini, Churros, decisions which are just foisted on the community. The community didn't even know they were going to happen until that council meeting. That's not good enough. That is not how a good council works, and we won't be accepting that.
And as mayor, how do you feel that your role would be different than the councillor? What does a mayor do that is different from the rest of council?
I see the mayor as basically the citizen who is looked at. So basically, my job is to represent the Shire. So my job will be to listen and to put forward what the Uabdalla people say. So in terms of, for instance, with the bushfires, my job would have been to be everywhere, at the emergency centres, talking to the people, talking to the press, making sure that the voice of the people is heard, and that I'm able to reflect that voice. Same thing with COVID. I thought I did a bit of that COVID stuff on my Facebook page. A lot of kind of, we're all in this together. These are the types of things you can do. Just being positive and saying, okay, we have a problem. How are we going to solve it? I was doing that a lot with the Facebook stuff with COVID. Positive messages, positive ways of dealing with this. That's the job of the mayor. In terms of the council meetings, the job of the mayor is basically, firstly, to keep order, and secondly, to make sure that once again the voices of the councillors are heard to the staff. So once again, it's going back to the general manager, working positively with the general manager, so that the priorities of the councillors are reflected in the council meetings, and the importance of the councillors' concerns are also reflected. So, as we said before, that questions are asked and questions are welcomed.
And when you say, that councillors should reflect the concerns of the community, the Shire has changed a lot, I'm sure, in the time that you've been here. Do you feel that council is reflective of the diversity in our community now?
No. And one of the things I thought was just amazing this time was that there's more women than men seeking election. I think that is amazing. I'm hoping that we'll see a reflection of that in the next council meeting. One of the things that I would like to see more of is that we have around about 5% of our community who have an Aboriginal heritage. The last time I hope I'm right, that we actually had an Aboriginal representative when Tom Slockey was a councillor.
What year would that have been?
That was 94,
Yeah,
certainly
that's quite
94.
a while ago.
Yeah. So what I would hope is that in this next council, we actually make people feel, yeah, look, the council is a worthwhile place to be. It's a worthwhile place for us to kind of put up our hand. And I'll be working as much as I possibly can with our Aboriginal community to see what we can do to make it so that perhaps at next council meeting, next council elections, there's a strong Aboriginal contingent as well. We also have to look at the multicultural groups. We have a very European shire here. When you look at the demographics, it's UK, England, German, Dutch, and then Greek, Italian. It's very, very European. And it's very difficult if you're not European, because we have a scattered community and not many people to kind of connect up with. That's changing, and that is really good. What we need to be doing is actually working with the smaller multicultural groups to make sure that they actually get the support that they need to start to kind of say, well, yeah, we're an important part of this community as well, and this is how we can contribute our culture, our ways of life. Part of that's festivals. I love festivals, and I think we need to be looking at how we build festivals in this community.
I don't think there'd be anyone who would disagree with that after the COVID restrictions were just coming out of. Everybody wants to have a good time now. So just briefly, could you tell me a little bit about your who you're running with, who's on your ticket, and why you work well together?
Okay. I am so privileged to have the people that I'm running with. We have 5 other candidates. We have Maureen, who's been an advocate for this community ever since she's been here, which I think is in the early 80s. So, and she has worked really hard to be a very strong advocate.
It's Maureen Searson.
Maureen Searson. Then we have Matt Findlay, who is working with his father now. His father's been a builder here for years. Matt had spent most of his life here and went to school here. He's a builder as well, but he's also been a teacher. He's also been a kind of around the world, so he knows just how good the Shire is. He's got a really strong commitment to making sure that we do development right. We have Claire McCash. Claire is a manager with her family oyster business, so she knows all about aquaculture. On top of that, she's got strong tertiary qualifications in environmental design, and she's worked in both this council and on the Gold Coast in that kind of area, so in engineering, design, and so on. So she knows that stuff backwards. Then we have Deirdre Russack from Narooma. She has, once again, that's a very old Narooma family. Deirdre spent a lot of her younger years here. Then she went to Canberra, was a midwife, become a very senior public servant, so knows administration backwards and knows this community backwards too. She's it's very committed to the Narooma community and has a strong voice there. And finally, Jack Egan. Jack Egan is a very strong environmental campaigner. You would have heard about him from Zero SE. His house burnt down during the 2019-2020 fires, and he's been a very strong and very effective advocate for people who also suffered during that fire. As I said, I wish we could all get all 6 on board, because in fact they are all incredibly strong councillors, and I'm hoping that perhaps there'll be a rotation so that we see all of them at some point at the council.
Excellent. And I'd love to keep the focus on your message for our Shire, but just briefly, you're running as a candidate for Labour.
Yep.
What benefit do you think the affiliation with a major political party can have for our Shire?
Okay. That's an important question, because a lot of people are very suspicious of that. When I first thought about running for council, I looked at being an independent, at actually running. No, I only joined the Labor Party the day after Morrison got elected. And I was very strongly of the idea that we need independence. Then I started to look at it and look at the reality of it. As an independent, I don't have any background support. I don't have the kind of support from Labor mayors, from other Labor councillors in other areas. I don't have support. And if I go, as I said, advocacy is so important, but I'm only a voice. But if I've got Labor Party connections, I have a stronger voice when I advocate at state and federal level. Like yesterday, on Saturday, I was talking to some of the Labor shadow ministers and making connections there, which will be very difficult if I was an independent. So I'm looking at this not as a practical, pragmatic way of making sure that we do the best thing for the Shire. And the best way for me to represent the Shire is to be part of a larger group where I can get the support, can actually do the advocacy well, can actually make sure that I do the very, very best for the Shire. I don't believe I can do that as an independent.
Thank you. Very, very clear. As a community member and as a small business owner you've been in the past, you know how much our local community has suffered with COVID and floods and bushfire. Bypass in other communities might be different in Maria, but a bypass in other communities have shown a reduction in commerce for up to 5 years. Given the position we're in now and where we're going forward, what do you think council can do to help our business community?
The business community knows best how to do best for the business community. Our job is to listen to the business community and then work with them to actually make sure that they work as well as they possibly can. Because without our business community, we don't have employment, we don't have the vibrant things that we're talking about. So my first response is to meet with the business community, meet as partners. How are we going to build this so that it works? And I think that is the first place. I don't want to say, this is what we're going to do or that's what we're going to do. My first point is, what does the business community want to do? How can we as a council work with them to actually get the result that they want? Once we do that, then we can start to, then the council can say, okay, we'll do this, we'll do that. And I think that's the important way to go. Same thing with the Bay. The Bay needs the same type of support as Maria, and I'll be doing the same thing there. One of my first jobs, if I'm mayor, will be to go to the Bay, to the business people there, and to say, what can we do to make the Bay what it should be, a gateway to the Shire. And I've been talking to some business people already about that, and I'll be wanting to make sure that that happens.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. This has been David Grace speaking with you. He is the Labour mayoral candidate for this year's upcoming elections here in our Shire. And finally, what song have you chosen for us today?
Another positive one, Walking on Sunshine. The reason I've chosen that is if we do solar right, we're going to be walking on sunshine and having a very positive and very strong Shire.
Excellent. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you, David.
Thank you.